Do you remember when television heroes smiled more than they scowled? When adventure smelled like sea salt, gasoline, and freshly printed detective novels? The 1980s gave us one man who embodied all of that, Thomas Magnum, the mustached private investigator who lived in paradise and made responsibility look effortless. For 8 dazzling seasons, Magnum PI captured the fantasy of freedom itself, a red Ferrari on sunlit roads, friendships stronger than bullets, and a wink that told you everything would be all right. But behind the tropical sunsets and witty one-liners hid a trove of forgotten stories, creative gambles, moral choices, and strange coincidences that shaped television history. What if the show's most iconic moments were accidents? What if its star was never meant to play the role that defined him? Tonight we uncover 12 hidden facts that reveal why Magnum PI was not just a show, but a phenomenon that changed how America dreamed. Fact number 12. The Chippendale connection. Every legend leaves a shadow. And for Magnum PI, that shadow wore a red Hawaiian shirt, chipmunk-sized. When Chippendale Rescue Rangers premiered in 1989, younger audiences unknowingly met a tribute to Tom Selleck's laid-back detective. Dale's red floral shirt, carefree grin, and reckless charm were directly modeled after Magnum. Chip, by contrast, channeled Indiana Jones, a nod to the fascinating twist of fate where Selleck himself almost became the real Indiana Jones. That detail, often brushed aside as trivia, actually marked the cultural explosion Magnum PI ignited. In the early 1980s, network television became a factory for icons. Magnum's look wasn't a costume. It was confidence in fabric form. The bright aloha shirts that once whispered tourist suddenly screamed cool. By 1984, sales of Hawaiian shirts in the continental U.S. had risen sharply, as recorded in Los Angeles Times fashion archives, proof that a single fictional detective could reshape real-world wardrobes. Even decades later, Magnum's style remains shorthand for easygoing charisma. The aviators, the tan, the chest hair, everything about him announced an effortless kind of masculinity that felt approachable rather than intimidating. When modern reboots try to recreate that aura, they rarely succeed. The original wasn't designed to sell a look. It was built on personality. That's why Dale's tiny shirt still sparks a sense of familiarity. Behind the cartoon nostalgia lies an echo of 1980s optimism, a reminder that style once symbolized spirit, not status. And as Magnum PI influenced animation, another sensory icon was quietly evolving a sound that would define an era, revving engines and memories alike. Fact number 11. The original theme song that got replaced. It's hard to imagine Magnum PI without that explosive brass riff that made hearts race faster than the Ferrari's engine. Yet in its earliest version, the show's theme was a smooth, jazzy tune composed by Ian Fairbairn Smith, pleasant but hardly heroic. It belonged more to a dimly lit cocktail lounge than to the adrenaline-charged world of Magnum's Hawaii. Producers sensed it instantly. The show needed an anthem, not ambiance. Enter Mike Post and Pete Carpenter, television's hit-making duo, whose credits already included Hill Street Blues and the A-Team. They gave Magnum his musical identity, a thunderous synth-driven masterpiece that sounded like waves crashing against steel. According to Variety's 1981 review, the theme ranked among the decade's most instantly recognizable TV openings, later earning a BMI Television Music Award. The transformation wasn't just auditory, it was emotional. That 90-second sequence condensed the show's entire promise: danger, humor, freedom. Decades later, those first few notes still ignite nostalgia, appearing in commercials, parodies, and even NFL halftime montages. It's one of television's rare themes that doesn't just introduce a story, it is the story. With its music blazing and its look immortalized, Magnum PI had already achieved pop culture perfection by the end of its first season. But behind that confident rhythm, deeper stories about identity and authenticity were waiting to unfold. Fact number 10. The British gentleman who wasn't British at all. He spoke like royalty, walked like a soldier, and scolded like an Oxford professor. Jonathan Quayle Higgins III. The rigid estate manager of Robin's Nest seemed the very essence of British discipline. But in truth, the man behind the accent, John Hillerman, was born not in London, but in Denison, Texas. That revelation still surprises fans today. Hillerman's journey to Higgins was one of dedication rather than birthright. Trained in classical theater, he studied dialects until he could slip seamlessly into the voice of an English aristocrat. His commitment was so convincing that many British viewers reportedly believed he was one of their own. When the BBC aired the show, letters poured in from audiences praising the fine British actor John Hillerman, unaware he was an American Southerner. Critics called his performance the heart of the show's humor, balancing Magnum's laid-back chaos with perfect precision. The Guardian later described him as a man who could steal a scene with the lift of an eyebrow. Over the years, Hillerman earned an Emmy and a Golden Globe, cementing his reputation as one of television's most skilled character actors. Off-screen, his modesty mirrored the quiet dignity of Higgins himself. After retiring in 1999, Hillerman returned to Texas, living quietly until his passing in 2017. His portrayal remains a study in transformation, a reminder that authenticity isn't about birthplace, but about conviction. And speaking of authenticity, one small personal item worn by Tom Selleck himself carried more truth than all the props on set combined. Fact number 9. The Detroit Tigers cap that became a legend. That navy blue cap with the old English D wasn't wardrobe design, it was personal history. Tom Selleck, born in Detroit, was a lifelong fan of the Tigers. When he began shaping the character of Thomas Magnum, he asked producers to let his detective wear the cap as part of his identity. They agreed, and with that simple choice, a personal memory became one of television's most enduring images. The Detroit Tigers cap became more than a prop. It symbolized the real man beneath the TV hero, the veteran, the dreamer, the ordinary guy beneath the tan. It anchored Magnum to something human and familiar, a quiet contrast to the Ferrari's flash. The Smithsonian Institution recognized its significance decades later, placing Selleck's original cap in the National Museum of American History, a fitting tribute to how even the smallest detail can define an era. Selleck once joked that he wore the hat to keep the sun out of his eyes, but for millions it became a banner of loyalty and pride. The show didn't just glamorize paradise. It grounded it in something relatable: home. That's what made Magnum more than an archetype. He was every man who ever dreamed of a simpler life under the sun. From the actor who wasn't British to the cap that carried a piece of America across the Pacific, Magnum PI had proven that authenticity in sound, speech, or symbol was the secret ingredient behind its timeless charm. Fact number 8. The Hawaiian setting that happened by accident. For millions of viewers, Magnum PI and Hawaii were inseparable, a sun-soaked paradise where mysteries met ocean breezes and palm trees framed every chase. But what most people never realized is that Hawaii wasn't part of the show's original creative plan. It was a network accident born out of budget pragmatism rather than artistic vision. When Hawaii 5-0 ended in 1980 after 12 successful seasons, CBS suddenly found itself with expensive sound stages, camera crews, and tax agreements sitting idle on Oahu. According to network archives, executives simply decided not to let them go to waste. They needed a new show that could justify the infrastructure, and so Magnum PI was born, or more accurately, recycled. Yet this pragmatic decision became one of television's happiest coincidences. The Hawaiian setting didn't just decorate the story, it defined it. The island's lush beauty mirrored Magnum's spirit, relaxed, colorful, unpredictable. It was both a paradise and a stage for conflict where sunlight could mask danger and serenity could dissolve into suspense. Tourism officials later credited the series for a notable rise in travel interest to Hawaii during the early 1980s. The show's postcards in motion made viewers feel like they were part of an endless vacation, and for many Americans emerging from a decade of political and economic uncertainty, that escapism was priceless. As the tropical backdrop became its own character, Magnum P.I. proved that sometimes brilliance is born not from grand vision, but from resourceful coincidence. And while the island gave the show its soul, another unconventional choice, a look straight into the camera, gave it its heart. Fact number 7. The wink to the audience. Magnum's fourth wall breaks. Few 1980s shows dared to let their heroes speak silently to the audience, but Magnum P.I. made it a signature move. When Tom Selleck raised an eyebrow or shot a quick glance toward the lens, viewers felt as if they were in on the secret. It was television's most subtle handshake, a private joke shared between actor and audience. Breaking the fourth wall was risky for a drama. At a time when TV crime series demanded gritty realism, a wink could have shattered the illusion. But for Magnum P.I., it worked because the show itself existed between genres equal parts mystery comedy and lifestyle fantasy. Selleck's glances reminded viewers that he knew it too. They were not just observers, they were his invisible partners in mischief. Film historians later compared these moments to cinematic predecessors like Groucho Marx, or later Ferris Bueller, each using direct acknowledgement to create intimacy. But Selleck's approach was different, playful, yet grounded, never breaking character, merely bending the rules. The effect was emotional closeness. Fans didn't just watch Magnum, they knew him. In a pre-internet world, those fourth wall breaks became the original engagement strategy. Long before social media, Magnum's gaze was enough to build loyalty, empathy, and warmth, a smile through the screen that said, "You're part of this too." By the time the audience realized how attached they'd become, Magnum had already transformed television's emotional language, all by simply looking their way. Fact number 6. The hero who rarely killed. In the landscape of 1980s television, where action often meant explosions, automatic weapons, and endless casualties, Thomas Magnum stood apart. Despite the gunfights and car chases that filled the series, Magnum almost never killed anyone. Across 8 seasons, he had only one confirmed on-screen kill, a restraint nearly unheard of for an action hero of that era. This was no accident. Series creator Donald P. Bellisario himself, a former U.S. Marine, wanted a protagonist who carried both skill and conscience. Magnum's combat experience was real, but so was his humanity. He was a man who had seen war and wanted no part of repeating its violence. That moral line gave the show depth. When Magnum drew his gun, the audience sensed it mattered. It was an act of necessity, not ego. Other shows of the time, like The A-Team or Miami Vice, leaned into spectacle, endless gunfire, and chaos. Magnum P.I. instead found drama in restraint. It made tension internal rather than external, moral rather than mechanical. The result was a hero who could punch, joke, and chase, but whose strength came from compassion. Selleck's portrayal amplified this nuance. Beneath the bravado was empathy, the kind of man who'd buy a beer for his enemy rather than finish a fight. It's one reason modern audiences still connect with him. He was tough, but never cruel. Magnum didn't win through dominance. He won through decency. That same decency extended beyond the screen, not just in the show's themes, but even in its physical legacy. And nowhere was that legacy more visible than in a house that became one of television's most famous landmarks. Fact number 5. The real Robin's Nest and its vanishing legacy. Every episode began with the sun glinting off the ocean, as Magnum strolled through Robin's Nest, the luxurious estate where he lived rent-free while working as a private investigator. Many assumed it was a fictional set, but the mansion was very real. Known as the Anderson Estate, it sat on Oahu's Waimanalo Beach, surrounded by 3 acres of tropical paradise and framed by the turquoise Pacific. With its red-tiled roof and private lagoon, the estate became an icon of 1980s television, symbolizing the freedom and fantasy that defined the series. For years, fans made pilgrimages to its gates, snapping photos and imagining Magnum's Ferrari in the driveway. It wasn't just a house, it was the embodiment of escapism. But time was not kind to Robin's Nest. After the show ended, ownership changed hands several times, and by 2015 the property was sold for over $8 million. Shortly after it was demolished, its lagoon filled its gardens, leveled its memory, preserved only in reruns and photographs. The Honolulu Star-Advertiser reported that preservationists had tried to save it, calling it a monument to television history, but development won out. Its destruction carried a quiet symbolism. The paradise that once seemed eternal was, like all good things, fleeting. Yet through nostalgia, Robin's Nest still stands in memory, in film, in imagination. And perhaps that's where it belongs, untouched by time, glowing forever in the golden light of 1980s television. From the restraint of a hero who refused to kill to the fading beauty of his fictional home, Magnum P.I. taught that integrity, both moral and material, is what endures long after fame fades. Fact number 4. The generous gesture that defined a star. In Hollywood, stories of ego and excess are endless, but Tom Selleck's quiet act of generosity remains one of its most enduring legends. When Magnum P.I. reached its 8th and final season, CBS refused to issue production bonuses for the crew, despite the show's massive success. Selleck, understanding how hard his team had worked through years of heat-long shoots and tropical humidity, took matters into his own hands. He wrote a personal check for every crew member, $1,000 each, a significant sum in 1988, thanking them for their dedication. Adjusted for inflation, it would equal around $4,000 today. The gesture wasn't for publicity. There were no press releases, no cameras. Most fans didn't learn about it until years later, when the story surfaced through interviews with production staff. That moment revealed something vital about Selleck. He wasn't just playing a decent man on screen, he was one. In an industry often built on self-interest, he led with gratitude. Cast and crew described him as grace under pressure, someone who always remembered names, shared credit, and valued teamwork. The kindness echoed beyond the show. When he later joined Blue Bloods, co-stars mentioned that Selleck carried the same humility decades later. His decision during Magnum P.I.'s finale wasn't a one-time act. It was a reflection of his nature. This generosity also framed the emotional heart of the series itself, a story about loyalty, friendship, and responsibility. And those same principles guided one of the show's most unexpected achievements, tackling the psychological wounds of war with honesty rare for its time. Fact number 3. Confronting the shadows of Vietnam. Beneath its tropical charm and humor, Magnum P.I. dared to face something deeper, the lingering trauma of Vietnam. Thomas Magnum, along with his closest friends, TC and Rick, were all Vietnam veterans, and the show treated their service not as a footnote, but as a defining force. In an era when television preferred simple heroes, Magnum P.I. broke convention. Episodes portrayed flashbacks, nightmares, and moments of quiet despair that reflected real, post-war struggles. These weren't caricatures of soldiers. They were men haunted by the cost of survival. It was subtle, heartfelt, and surprisingly progressive. Series creator Donald P. Belisario himself, a former Marine, drew from his own experiences to infuse authenticity into the scripts. Military consultants advised the writers, ensuring uniforms, ranks, and terminology were accurate. This realism didn't glorify war, it humanized it. For viewers who had lived through the 1960s and 1970s, those scenes hit home. Letters from veterans poured into CBS thanking the show for portraying the complexities of return. The silence, the isolation, the guilt. TV Guide once described Magnum PI as the first series to make Vietnam veterans human again. In hindsight, that sensitivity was revolutionary. It foreshadowed the psychological depth that modern dramas would later explore. Through Magnum's quiet reflection and occasional melancholy, audiences glimpsed a truth beneath the tan, the pain that even paradise couldn't erase. From generosity behind the camera to compassion within the script, Magnum PI revealed that true heroism comes not from action, but from empathy. Fact number 2. When Magnum met Jessica Fletcher. In the mid-1980s, television crossovers were rare and risky. Networks feared that merging two established worlds could confuse audiences or dilute their identities. Yet, in 1986, Magnum PI defied those odds with one of the strangest and most memorable collaborations in small-screen history. The mustachioed private investigator from Hawaii met the sharp-witted mystery novelist from Murder, She Wrote. It began with Magnum PI's episode Novel Connection and concluded days later on Murder, She Wrote in Magnum on Ice. The story saw Jessica Fletcher, played by Angela Lansbury, visiting Hawaii only to stumble into a murder case that entangled Magnum himself. What followed was a delightful clash of methods, her quiet deduction versus his brash intuition, her tea-time logic against his sunburned improvisation. For audiences, the crossover was a revelation, proof that television universes could collide long before cinematic crossovers became fashionable. Ratings surged on both networks, and critics praised the chemistry between Selleck and Lansbury, describing it as a detective dance between opposites. TV Guide later called it the classiest stunt of the decade. But beyond novelty, the episodes captured what made both shows beloved heart. Despite their differences, Magnum and Jessica shared a core belief that truth mattered, and justice could still prevail even amid paradise or small-town intrigue. It was television's reminder that good storytelling transcends genre. And yet, as clever as that partnership was, an even greater twist of fate awaited Selleck, one that could have changed Hollywood history forever. Fact number 1. The role that got away, Indiana Jones. Few actors in television history have faced a what-if as legendary as Tom Selleck's. In 1980, when Raiders of the Lost Ark was in pre-production, George Lucas and Steven Spielberg agreed that Selleck was their ideal Indiana Jones. He had the charisma, the wit, the rugged charm. A screen test confirmed it. Selleck fit the fedora perfectly. But there was one obstacle: his commitment to Magnum PI. CBS refused to release him from contract, locking him into the pilot season. In a cruel twist, a writer's strike delayed Magnum's production for months' time that would have allowed him to film Raiders after all. By then, Harrison Ford had taken the role, and cinema history changed course. Selleck later admitted in interviews with Entertainment Weekly that the loss stung, but he never regretted his loyalty. Magnum gave me everything, he said, and Indiana Jones gave me perspective. Indeed, his career flourished, and his image became inseparable from the golden 1980s spirit, heroic yet human. In hindsight, the missed opportunity preserved the balance of two worlds. Ford became cinema's adventurer, and Selleck became television's everyman hero. Each role fit its time, its audience, and its legacy, and perhaps that was destiny, not loss. As Magnum drove into the Hawaiian sunset, he didn't need a whip or an archaeologist's hat to prove his place in pop culture. All he needed was that smile, that Ferrari, and a loyal audience who never stopped believing that decency and charm could still win the day. The magic of Magnum PI wasn't built on explosions, gadgets, or complicated plots. It was born from humanity. Beneath the palm trees and the charm was a show that believed good men could still exist, that friendship mattered, and that laughter could live beside loss. Each of the 12 facts, from the cartoon inspirations to the lost chance at Indiana Jones, tells the same story: Magnum PI was more than entertainment. It was a reflection of its time, an echo of optimism that television rarely dares to revisit today. Even now, over 40 years later, the show endures because it made viewers feel something real. It wasn't about perfection. It was about character. Magnum reminded audiences that life like Hawaii was beautiful but unpredictable, a place where adventure met heart. So, of the 12 facts above, which one surprised you the most? Was it the generosity behind the camera, the realism of war's aftermath, or the small twist of fate that kept Selleck from swinging through history as Indiana Jones? Thank you for joining this nostalgic journey through the sunlit memories of 1980s television. If you enjoyed reliving the magic of Magnum PI, make sure to like this video, share your favorite memory in the comments, and subscribe for more stories from TV's golden age. See you in the next video. This is TV Time.